Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Friday Focus, our third edition. Really pleased that you've joined us. I know here in the UK, it's the getting close to the final days of term. Looking forward to the summer break. Our guest this morning has just returned to school after a break, and obviously in an international setting. So I'm very pleased to welcome this morning Matt Pittman, completely the other side of the globe. Matt, Australian, just introduce yourself. Just tell us a little about yourself.
No worries. Look, I'm a secondary leader currently in a position of leading a secondary school in an independent setting in which we are trying to rewrite the current model of schooling to accommodate students that are in schools now and approaching schools in the future, trying to actively address some of the concerns that I think are being shared pretty widely around the world in terms of disengagement and disconnection, and trying to create, I guess, a model for others to come and see and experience and be a part of.
Thank you. And so for those that you're watching and listening, I actually, it was Al Kingsley, the great Al Kingsley, that posted something on LinkedIn that said he'd come across your book, or you'd sent him your book, and I got the book straight away and had started reading. My history in school life has always been about working with challenging organisations and trying to bring positive change to those organisations. And certainly, Smart Curriculum is doing that across the UK at the moment. That's our focus in terms of very focused on curriculum design. But I'm really interested that narrative, and it's coming out more and more, as you said, Matt, that people are feeling that the education system is, I hesitate to use the word broken, but it's focused on the wrong things. And there are positive people that are looking to reorient that. And your book, The Connection, the educated child and the community, into what's prompted that feeling. What is it that you've come across in school that people that are listening will be familiar with, that will have come across wherever they are in the world?
So I lost you for a bit in the middle there, but I think no, that's okay. What came through was I think you were asking about the book and how it came to be and what was the driver behind it. So my experience is I've been in education for about 14 years, and for 12 of those years I've been in leadership. So I had a very fortunate experience very early on to jump into an upper middle leadership role. And just as a measure of survival, I went and was consistently seeking out professional development, and that landed me in back in university and seeking out master's degrees. And so at the moment, I'm studying undertaking my Doctor of Education, and I have all this research from across student wellbeing to pastoral care programs, to leading curriculum teams, to effective curriculum writing with evidence-based strategies. And all of it, I guess, as I was approaching the Doctor of Education, came together and all the threads started to all link towards community and bringing people together. And I guess the narrative, if that's the right word, of the current schooling experience is isolation. And it is about ranking, and it's numbers, and it's very impersonal, I believe. And so if all of my research and my experience is saying that people need to be brought together and they need to understand how they work in a greater community, then that's sort of where I think schools need to be, and that's where we need to be headed. And so it was just by chance that I came across a post on LinkedIn that was an independent publisher here in Melbourne, in Australia, asking to, if you had an idea and a wish to float an idea for a book, that you could make a call. And I made a time, and I had a conversation, and in 24 hours I had an idea to write a book about whole school connection. And I guess the idea was to make it as practical as possible, and that means building connection within the system we have and not waiting for the system to change. And so that itself is a challenge, but I think it's one that we can take on if we have the will. And considering a lot of the research for connection suggests that rates of bullying decrease, your truancy decreases, your engagement increases, your outcomes, which, I hesitate to make kind of one of the flags for connection. But if we have a system that is about scores and grades, and that's how we're marking achievement, well, connection will improve that as well. So if connection can do all of these things, then I wanted to write a book that would help schools strategically plan to connect people for the betterment of schools, and to help young people who are really struggling at the moment with not feeling like they have a sense of belonging or a sense of ownership over their education.
Matt, if there's any signal issues, it's one of these wonderful things that we're trying to do. I'm here in the UK, you're in Australia, and it's amazing that we're in the same room having the conversation. Technology has moved on so far, but thank you. I wanted to, you shared with me the structure of your book. I'd just like to put it on the screen so people can see that, so that the connection curriculum. Just talk about this framework. Just tell us a little bit, and then let's get into some of the sort of conversations. Many things you've just said that I'd love to sort of pick your brain on.
So the framework was designed essentially to map directly to a general strategic plan document. I think it's, they're pretty universal across the world in terms of the key components, and then collecting data, and then how will we address this in the next year, or whatever the window might be. So the framework maps to that strategic plan template. But I guess in this image, it's against a tree, because I think it is all about growth. Connection is not something that you can't plant the seed and expect it to happen really quickly. You have to nurture the soil and water and tend to that plant to ensure that it grows. And it all starts, the roots of this framework are in your context. And so one of the most important parts, I think, of the book is very early on, where I really tried to explain that this is not a prescription for connection. Like you will not read this book and your school will magically become connected. And there are strategies and there are tools, but you really have to start by understanding the current state of your school and your context. And I think that's what everything that can change positively is built on that. And so you start with your context. Beyond that, there are some non-negotiables that I detail in the book, and I'd say that they're probably the most, one in particular, I think, is one that will potentially be difficult to reconcile with, and so those non-negotiables are being realistic rather than being idealistic.
God, having said that, there's one that's more difficult. God, tell us what you think that one is.
Oh, that one is time. And it's a pretty short section in the book, but basically we're not going to have any more time. and again, we're working within the system we have. So the systemic demands are probably not going to decrease either. And so working within your context means that, and understanding your school identity and understanding your people in the situation you are at the start means that you really have to cast away some things that are not working. And I think schools are really terrible at doing that. We hold on to things until they disintegrate from use. And I think there is no more time in the day or the week, and we have to be realistic about that fact. I think that time becomes, or the argument of not having time becomes the biggest barrier to change. And so I know that section, again, being brief, it's essentially me saying, well, we have to, if you genuinely want to make change in schools and you're looking at, not just the students, but the adults, outside the gate with the parents, inside with your teachers and your leaders, if you want to improve the situation for all of those people in your community, then we need to make time. We need to find time. You cannot wait again for something to change or something to impact upon you. Like, you need to be the driving force here. And that's the same with being realistic. Goal setting, by its very nature, can be really idealistic, but I think schools are too much so. We're too wrapped in our own vision. And I think that for the time that we're in, and to really make change that is substantial in the years to come, and to secure a future around a school that really serves tomorrow, we have to be realistic about who we are, what we're doing, and make changes on the ground. And so they're two that I think, if I was going to pick two, and there's four, but they're the two that I think would be perhaps the most challenging. I don't think that they're insurmountable tasks, otherwise they wouldn't serve a purpose in the book or in this framework, but they are non-negotiable. It's time to make a change, and if you are serious about that change, then we really have to push the button a little bit. We can't be sitting back and waiting any longer.
And that you make a good point, Matt. And it's that the capacity to do stuff is based on the amount of time that you have, and being realistic within the frameworks that we have. I mean, there are some government authorities that have particular requirements, and you have to work within those. And you can be as maverick as you like, but you've still got to work within those elements. But I think that's what every school leader is struggling with at the moment, and how far that controls the mission, in the sense that context issue. And I know in the book and we'll perhaps come back to it in a minute, you use an expression that I use quite a lot, and that's that one size doesn't fit all, and that understanding of the context is so key. Where am I? What am I trying to do? Who am I trying to do it with? Is such an important beginning point. Take us so you move on into landmarks and areas of focus. Anything else about that journey that you want to flag before we get into some of those other elements?
So I guess I think you have to reconcile with the tough questions. So they're the non-negotiables, and then where we kind of get to landmarks and where what I'm calling the connection journey really begins is with an understanding that schools and leaders and teachers and support staff and pretty much everyone that is associated with schools, for a decade or two, maybe more, we've been championing building strong relationships, and the data suggests that they are some of the most important things that you can do. And certainly now, amongst all of this disconnect, it's really important that you're building those relationships. But for connection, it needs to be more. And that's where the landmarks are on this journey. And I think from memory in the book, I hesitate to call them stops. And so they're more like things, not even milestones. They're just things that you will notice, you'll pass, and you'll move on. And it really is about building your relationships into a sense of belonging. And if we're looking at an article that I read just last night, and I was having some conversations about on LinkedIn, was about Year 9 students in Australia in particular, and they don't feel like they have a sense of belonging. They are in high numbers avoiding coming to school and refusing, and it's, you know, and this is in a situation where there are strong relationships. It's not because a student isn't getting along with a teacher or a friend. It is because they feel like they don't have a sense of belonging. They don't feel like they matter, or that they are engaged in an education that is for them. And so,
Matt, over here, there's a conversation around, it's referred to as the social contract, you know, the understanding that within a civil society, education is key. Certainly in the affluent world, education is key, and that young people will go to a provision of education which is usually free, sometimes contributed to. The signaling. Matt, apologies. We seem to have lost the signal there for a couple of minutes, so that happens. So let's just come back to where we were. So you were talking about Year 9 learners in Australia and the fact that they were disengaged with education. I mentioned that that's a conversation that's going on here in the UK. Lots of conversation around attendance. That you describe that as real belonging, you know, that sense of belonging. How have you seen that working? What is it that you've done that's made the difference where you are?
So In my current community, so we cater to year 7 to year 10 students at the moment, and the majority of those have not found their experience in a traditional school to be supportive, and it hasn't worked for them. And so I'm almost exclusively working with young people that are refusers, that don't want to attend school, that have been working online for quite a considerable amount of time, or just haven't been attending school at all. And so from the very start of the year, it was firstly about building those relationships and doing the normal kind of getting to know who that person is. But from there, what we are trying to do at Global Village is try and personalize everyone's experience, and not just personalize with, the standard individual learning plan or, whatever it might be. It is really about finding out what they are passionate about and what they want to actually achieve out of their education. And being quite a small community at the moment, we have the time and the staff to be able to do that. And as we scale that up, we're hoping to bring more people along for the ride, obviously, to maintain that. But working beyond the relationship and building a sense of belonging is really about, then once you have that relationship, it is acting on some of the things you've been talking about. It's, a relationship is very, A does something for B and B does something for A, and you learn and you share common interests. But for a young person to feel like they belong, especially when they feel like they haven't had that before, there needs to be something tangible that they can come and connect with. And so it is about creating special circumstances for a person. It is about going the extra mile. It is about connecting with the parents. Every 5 weeks, I have the opportunity to have a conversation with the parents and with that young person, and we set goals rather than having a discussion about where their learning is in terms of standardized markers. We talk about, well, what do you think you've achieved, and how might that inform the next 5 weeks? And I guess shifting that conversation from, here's where we've measured you, and here's how I'll help you get to the next measurement, whatever that might be. Yeah. I'm having conversations about, well, and flipping it. What do you feel was your biggest thing that you learned? Do you feel like you achieved the goals that you wanted? How can I support you to achieve a further goal? And just taking myself out of the position of a teacher and more into a guide or a facilitator. I'm now firmly giving the control over to that young person. And that sows the seeds of belonging, because now the direction that education takes, or the learning for the day or the week or the next couple of months, is in their hands. And so it belongs to them. And that means that all the tools that they might use also belong to them. And now they have a reason to attend, because they're not just a passive participant, they're the active contributor. Without their action, I have nothing to support them with. So when there are days where perhaps, because I'm working with teenagers, when there are days when perhaps they're not having a great day, or they're just, not as much perhaps gets achieved as what they might like, because it is them, then we have a conversation about how might they change what they were doing, and how can I support them. And so the sense of belonging in my context is developed by shifting my role and putting, and kind of where I can, putting the responsibility on that young person. And we're finding from 12 years old, which is year 7 here, they're able to take that and run with it. And there are certain levels of support that you provide. But I have young people who have not attended school for years who now are first in the door, and who sometimes I had a parent come and collect a young man the other day, and he was upset because it was 2 hours early, but they had to go to an appointment, and he was furious that he had to leave school. And so I think that's the difference between a relationship, which, again, all the metrics say is really important, and then having that sense of belonging. And I think that in the book, I talk about the relationship between a student and a teacher can be really, really strong. But if they don't have that relationship with all, 4, 5, 6 of their teachers, then that probably isn't enough for them to feel connected, feel that sense of belonging, and potentially attend school. And if they're only attending for one class, or not at all, and then missing a class that they feel is really valuable to them, then that's where I think where the issue lies.
That's a really important point, Matt. And I know, for my years of being in I'm not in post now, but that just resonates so much about the just even the conversation you just talked about, rather done with, not done to. That education is just seen as, well, they turn up and they receive a load of stuff and then they walk away. And there's part of the conversation around this fear of AI, bringing that into the conversation. But that element of, if we see children as just simply knowledge repositories that machine learn a whole load of facts, and all we're doing is just dumping in their minds a whole lot, and that in a sense is the kind of end point of knowledge-based curriculum, rather than as you've described, building relationships, but building human beings. We're moving into a world where we're nothing more than machines, and that what you're describing is nothing about machine learning whatsoever. It is about us as the human condition, about learning to build a society where people make a valuable contribution. Are you seeing AI? Are your staff questioning the position of that in your school? Is that?
We're not questioning it, because we're embracing it, and we're using it, in the way that I think is the best fit for education at the moment. It's a tool, and I think to scroll through a platform like LinkedIn, and 95% of the posts are about artificial intelligence, and they're either panic or the best strategies to use, or why it's a mistake, or whatever it might be. I just think that debate doesn't help in the classroom at all. It's a tool, and I think to focus so strongly on AI rather than the people that are using AI, that's where we are treading water, and we're becoming really, that argument to me is becoming really stagnant, because it's one side arguing one thing, the other is arguing the opposite, and we're having no huge impact on teaching and learning. And so it's a tool, and I think it's really valuable, for students who have missed a substantial amount of school. Being able to ask, an AI a question and bring up a template for them to be able to achieve success in a task, like that, to me is a benefit, because it's about goal setting rather than standardized learning. If they are trying to write a piece of work and they can use AI to help build that piece of work, well, the goal was to have a piece of work, and they have worked on it, and they have manipulated it, because they have to. AI, I haven't had anything produced from AI that I haven't then had to fact check or check, or like everything that it throws out, is, there's a ton of errors in it, and things that it's dreamed up, but it like in a connected school, and you really have to focus on your people. And I mean, phones are a tool, calculators are a tool, a pen is a tool, there are laptops. I think the longer we talk about bans and we talk about avoidance, the more genuine opportunities for learning about how we responsibly use these tools, the more they disappear. So there's no fear in my community, and that's certainly led by the principal, Pip Cleaves, who is an AI whiz, and that's, you know, that's because we're willing to dive into it rather than have a conversation about it.
Matt, you're bringing another perspective to this, because so many are, as you say, they're fearful or they're angry or whatever. But it's the context, the point that you started, that is the difference, isn't it? It's where you begin is the humanity of what we're trying to do, and how we join those elements together makes such a difference. I really, just reading your book and just going through the chapters, I hear so much that resonates with things that we've done. You even, so Dan Pink and motivation theory, and all of the I think some of the language might be slightly different in terms of as it spans the globe. Some of the words that we might use to describe elements of it, but it's really fascinating to see how you're using that in the school. So I've called this about positive changes. What if the influence of what you've written and studied, and the studies that you will continue to do, ground, what positive changes would you like to see in terms of systemic schooling, rather than individuals that are doing sort of problem solving in an individual community? What positive changes would you like to see across the system?
Well, I think the biggest systemic positive changes would be a complete shift on the current issues around staffing and an engagement. When I was looking at becoming a teacher and going to study my bachelor, it was a desirable field. It was, and not in an over the top sense, but there was a drive to become a teacher and to contribute to a community and almost give back, because you had that experience yourself at school, and whether that was entirely positive or parts and pieces, I think that's what makes a good teacher. And so to hear that people are leaving the profession, which is their passion, I think the biggest systemic marker from a staff perspective is that it's no longer a vocation that people really want to be in. And so, aside from the student impact, the schools just need to become community hubs. They need to become a part of their community again, and they need to be about learning. I think that education has completely separated itself from learning. I think education has become just a giant measuring stick that in this country serves just to feed universities. When a final year student here is studying and aiming for a score, that score only exists for a very short period of time, and it only can be used to enter university. From a systems level, what a ridiculous model to have, paired against a statement like building lifelong learners. Yeah, those two things just don't combine. You are not going to drive a passion for lifelong learning while you are basically putting young people in a pressure cooker to serve a purpose that they may not even want in 6 months into their degree, or they may not even want from the start.
No.
And so the whole design of this system to feed further education, or pigeonhole young people into some kind of career, is completely outdated. And so I think by focusing in again on the people early on, and the students, the staff, the parents, by creating this idea of that community hub, you get real opportunities for genuine learning that are not in service of a goal that potentially nobody wants. We're certainly seeing a huge drop in students completing their final year, their year 12 studies, and then moving on to university.
Yeah.
And it's because the system doesn't serve the people within it.
No,
and so the biggest systemic change for me would be to shift it back to, well, where is the exploration? Where is the play? Where is the fun? The things that we allow small kids to do. And I have a 1.5-year-old, and my wife and I just sit and watch her. And every day she picks up, about 4 or 5 different things. Some of them are not ideal, like launching something at the TV, but that's a new skill, and that's a thought process. And that's through, I don't have a lesson plan. I don't have an end goal. At the end of the night, I don't sit her down and we talk through what we did and didn't achieve. It's just free to explore. And so scaling that model up to account for age and development, why can't there be some free reign and some exploration?
Yeah.
And the same with staff. What happens to teachers being learners as well? It's become so restricted by process that everyone's just feeding the beast. And what is the benefit of the beast?
Yeah, absolutely. And you hit the nail on the head and said, so Dan Pink's motivation theory, autonomy is one of the key issues. Mastery, competence, I think you use the expression, or that capability. It's that element of I have agency to choose and decide where in a system it's kind of lose because we want conformity and we want uniformity across the system, and that loses that sense of, exactly as you said. I mean, all of Ken Robinson's stuff on creativity seems to have been lost in the system to that. As he said, a child, as exactly your daughter might be creative and in the morning, but the education system seems to be doing a good job of killing that through the education journey. I just want to, we obviously work with school leaders across England. I remember vividly a conversation sitting in the office with a head and his senior team. And he proudly said to me, 50% of my sixth formers, so 17, 18-year-olds, go to university. And it was a proud measure, and 50% is a good number in the community. I just asked the question, okay, so what do the other 50% do? And he honestly looked at me, stared for what seemed like a minute, but I'm sure it was a few seconds, and he said, nobody's ever asked me that question. I have no idea. And that's the essence. And what you're saying, creating community and creating connection means that every child is cared for, every child is important, every child has a place, every child has a future. It's not just those that are going to go into academic prowess. There's not those that are just going to be those that get higher education. Everyone has a future. Just what you said resonates so much. Sorry, go on.
No, I agree. It should serve everyone. The fact is that that education serves a small few, and we're ingrained. It's ingrained in us to present that top group because that's what's important to marketing, and that's even as a teacher, over my career, which is relatively short in comparison to many. But over my career, it has shifted from, being the students' work and being their education to now, as students' mark is a reflection of my teaching, and I'm being held accountable for it. And to some extent, like, that's true. Like, I am the teacher, but at what stage did we take even the responsibility of learning away from students and place it on teachers? And that's adding to this pressure and everything that you have to carry as an educator. And I just think that I really would love to know who education serves at the moment. If we're not getting young people going into university as expected, then that's not working. If staff are leaving in high numbers, if people are not picking up education at a university level, parents are more disconnected than ever before, then what should be a community builder is becoming a community destroyer. And we can't be surprised that young people, especially teenagers, as they become more and more or seek out independence, that they're saying, and they're calling time on it. Like, they know that it's not for them because their grandparents are talking about the exact same model of teaching, and you can move the desks and you can give the walls a coat of paint, but they know, they sit down and they know what it feels like. And they know what they want it to feel like. And that's something, that's an intangible measurement. And that's where student voice, true student voice, becomes a big component of, the future of schooling in my mind, but also part of the book. It's, if year nines are in this article are saying, well, we're not going to attend school. Well, that's student voice. It's not a couple of activities and you choose what you'd like to do in the classroom. That's student voice. The ones who are not attending. They're saying that it doesn't work and we need to start acting on it. Otherwise, what would bring a cluey teenager back to school at the moment, apart from change and a dedication to listening? I don't know what would, and that's.
But isn't that the point? Isn't that the point you make, Matt? That it's not one size fits all, and that's where connection with the humanity, finding what's happening with a particular child. I think we talked the other day, and I mentioned to you, examples that we've done over the years. So I found a child that wouldn't attend, whose grandfather was a herdsman, and in school he was an absolute nightmare. In the field with the cows, with the cattle, he was the cow whisperer. He was a different person. I've worked with lots of schools that have put things like radio stations into the school where kids would not engage with literacy, but they're very good at writing scripts and doing journalist interviews and planning a schedule, and would attend 100%. Where they were at sort of 10, 15% otherwise. It's finding the thing that's motivating. And that's why I'm really interested that you use that kind of motivation theory as the basis of that next step. Now, that doesn't mean that we can be all things to all people, because it's a system that's got resource limitations, but there's an attempt, isn't there? Sorry, go on, Matt, you carry on.
No, that's, the example of a radio station or a podcast booth or whatever, like they're quite easily done, and it fits within the current curriculum. It's like, this is the point, I think, of my whole, focus at the moment, and certainly the book. There are so many things that we can do that still serve the system and still tick the boxes. And I think that when we hear educational reform, or we hear somebody we don't know, I'm sure there are people who have never heard of me before. Like, that's, saying, let's go off and do this. The first thing that goes off in the back of your mind is, well, this will never work. But all I'm suggesting is that we focus on what are the learning needs, and not what are the learning needs in terms of what standard do they need to be at or what level, but like asking them, what are their learning needs? Asking your staff, what are your learning needs? What are the parents' learning needs? If this is a learning community, and that's what a school is supposed to be, then, to not ask that question, to not find out, even from an angry parent who, I hope it comes from a place of care, but an angry parent, to find out, well, what do you need to help you understand what's happening here, rather than just, how do I calm you down and reassure you? Reassure them by listening and then following some action. I just think the solution is to focus in on the people. And it doesn't strike me that there are many people in education who feel like everything's going well. And, that's not to say that there's not incredible schools and they're, incredible people and all of those things. But I think systemically, like, when you have something that is pretty common across the globe in a sector, then it means that something hasn't changed that probably needs to.
Yeah.
And every industry, we could talk about all kinds of industries that have stepped in a direction of growth, sometimes because they were pressured to and they have to, but education has almost pushed the other way and resisted change, because it would be a great effort in undoing and unlearning. And that's scary, I think. That's a terrifying thing to sort of think about. But we're at the point where we just have to do it.
Yeah.
We have to start thinking about, within the space we have, how can we really do things differently? And part of that is speaking to the people within your community. It's the first step on the framework. It's understanding your context, and not the context inside the leadership meeting, with the however many school leaders are sitting at the table. It's finding out from everyone, what is this school? How do you view it in relation to the mission and vision? Like, is it relevant? Are we measuring excellence in one category? Is that who we want to be? And I think we need to ask ourselves some harsh questions, and then strategically plan for the people, not the numbers.
Yeah. Well, within our work, we describe school design as 3 E's: efficient, effective, and ethical. But the effective is one of the things encapsulated within that is the school of choice, and that parents are buying in. They genuinely are saying, yeah, we want to be here because we recognize what's in this environment is what we want, and we choose it. That's a deliberate act. And then all of the connection issues that you're talking about kind of follow on. They precipitate from that start point. I'm with you entirely, Matt. And it's that, school leaders need to get back to that. It's not just go to school because that's what the government tells you should do, and if you don't, you'll get fined, which is what's happening in the UK at the moment. But the perverse incentive. A colleague of mine was talking the other day about, we've got to get away from the push factors and start thinking about the pull factors. What's attracting them in? What's pulling them in? And stop this kind of government enforcement. And that's a lot to do with all the things you're saying. This whole idea of, the system needs to be seen to be world class because it's producing these exam grades or PISA results or whatever else it might be. But engagement has to be the start, because nothing else is going to happen unless they are engaged in the process for personal gain. But it is for I'm here because I want to be. I want to see the determination. Yeah.
And I think that's the shift too that you see in. So parents have a large part to play in selection of schools, and I think that now, from my own experience, it's about, well, what is going to bring happiness to my child, rather than what's the average final score, or how many have won awards, or whatever it might be. And I think that shift makes this the perfect time to kind of go with the flow and focus on people, because it comes back to your your discussion about the 50% who were scoring quite well and the 50% who were unknown. That's that unknown, like 50% is so significant, but that, like, the unknown is like they're just not being served, so they're missing out. And I think when you have the resources, and I'm not talking about like really up to date tech and all those kind of things, but just the space, a teacher, some bare bones materials. There's to have people going through education at that percentage and missing out on it is just devastating. And to not know the end point for half of your cohort is really upsetting, actually. Like that's not what. It's like you're stealing the opportunity to learn away from those people by focusing on something that only 50% were interested in, or perhaps had the opportunities inside and outside of school to actually be able to achieve. And so what's the purpose of the other half of the cohort in your school? They would have been better served somewhere else.
Yeah. And the saddest part of that is that they just become a metric. It is just a number, and it is. It wasn't a school. It wasn't a small school. I mean, we're talking sort of probably 120, 130 learners. I mean, that's 60 children that we weren't clear about what they were up to. And it's easy for teachers because we've been successful in education. We ourselves have been to university and had degrees and further degrees and so on. And that may well be that the system has been successful for us, but the truth is that's not the destination for every child. But a good teacher has that, as you're portraying, the connection idea, that concept of the children, the young people have a life which may not involve higher education, and it might involve a successful business life which brings them success and fulfillment that goes beyond a degree or whatever else they might end up in the further education system. It left. That's why I raise it, Matt, because it left me really thinking deeply about that whole process. And I go, it wasn't an isolated conversation. I've had that conversation many times, and repeat the same. And you're right. And we're coming to the end of our time, Matt, together. And as we did the other day, it's we could talk for hours on this. We're obviously on the same page. It's really interesting to hear that in the other side of the globe, the conversations around the education process, the education organisation, the state system, the independent system is in the same position, and staff across the world are saying it's not all about numbers, it's about people, it's about organisation. What are you going to try and achieve in the next? So you're just coming into this term. What would you like to think is achieved in your school in the next term that's not in place right now? What are you looking to achieve in the short term?
So at the moment, the focus for this 10-week term is to build some entrepreneurial skills in everyone from 12 years old up to our eldest student is 17, I think. And we, by the midway point of this term, we want them to pitch a business, and we're going to provide a loan to the students to try and get their business off the ground, with the intention of going to the market on the weekend and selling their products. And so I think that, again, it's focused on what they are connected to in and outside of school. And it is, I'm taking curriculum from literacy, numeracy, humanities. There's certainly, for some of the projects that I've seen being planned, there's science aspects, but I'm just picking parts out and putting it all under this umbrella of entrepreneurship and allowing creativity to be the driver. That's my job, is to look and see how we map, the work that's being done to what we have to map it to. But on the learner's side, they're learning how to write a business plan. They're designing a logo and a label for their product. They're building prototypes. They're learning even just public speaking, how they have to stand up in front of a panel and Shark Tank style present a 2-minute pitch on why they should receive some funding. And I think with very little additional tools or effort, we're shifting the focus onto the learner and managing to tick a huge amount of curriculum boxes on the way through. And I think that, that isn't possible in every environment yet, but certainly within a classroom, you can change your activity to be something more creative. There's no such thing as an uncreative young person. They just think that creativity is drawing or painting or photography or whatever it might be. And so just give them some time to explore. And if it's almost as valuable when they produce something as it is if they don't, because the conversations then are where the learning happens. And I think that's what we're trying to do. And I think that's the essence of a focus on people and a focus on connection.
Matt, you press buttons on my side. I was involved in designing an enterprise academy over here in the UK, and so it's not just about money making. It's about the action. It's about that impetus to create and design, and it can be in all sorts of different dimensions. And it's not just for sale. There's the whole element of social enterprise where people are doing things to give back to the community. As exactly you said, there's so much that can be done. It is such a rewarding activity. We've just done it not long ago with a primary school, and to see 6-year-olds coming up with ideas, and really practical, deliverable ideas. That we have a foundation over here in the UK with some some entrepreneurs that were funding that, and it just, again, pitching their ideas, clarity of speech, working out what was important. Just brilliant. I wish you well. Maybe we'll engage on that further and see how you've got on with that journey. That's great to see. Matt, I really appreciate your conversation this morning. We've come to an hour, so we've been going for it. And for those that are watching and listening, I know some will be watching, as it's the last day of term here in the UK. We'll be watching after the recording, so it'll be up for a while. We have been we've been broadcasting on LinkedIn and on YouTube this morning. And Matt, I know you'd share as much as you need to. I'm going to just put on the screen, and hopefully you can see. So this is the Amazon link to Matt's book, The Connection Curriculum: Igniting Positive Change in Schools Through Sustainable Connection. Please do go and have a look and get some ideas. It's a really interesting read. Some of the things that are being said here in the UK, and I know in other territories, really what you're saying, Matt, resonates so deeply with people. And just thanks for being here. Thanks for engaging, and I appreciate your input today. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a quick hour.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yes, it goes quickly, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And amazing to think. Oh, I mean, okay, connection issues are what they are. I think it was the 8 o'clock in the morning. Searching phones and whatever. Though that it always dips at that point here, which is obviously sort of what, 5 o'clock for you, thereabouts.
Yeah, almost 6.
Yeah.
Yep.
Again, thank you so much for joining. We really appreciate it. We're going to end the stream now, but thanks very much for being part of this conversation, Matt. And I wish you well. I will engage. We'll converse following this, but thanks very much.
Thank you.